Stories Philippines podcast.
Please be advised, the journey we are about to take explores themes and scenes some listeners will find profoundly disturbing. The story beneath this episode casts a heavy gloom, touching on abduction, loss, and the uncanny exploitation of the vulnerable. Listeners are urged to proceed with caution and to take care of themselves as the tale unfolds. A shadow slips across the face of the city as midnight nears. Somewhere, a set of headlights flares to life, briefly illuminating the cracked concrete of an empty street. In the blink of an eye, it's gone. But in its wake, a chilling question lingers over every parent's restless sleep. What does fear look like when you cannot see its face? What if horror does not howl at the window, but rolls slowly by in the form of a white van? Locked doors, drawn shades, whispered warnings. A community clings to old protections, staring out at the indifferent dark, never sure whether the horrors are true or merely the mind's attempt to give shape to anxiety. Somewhere, a mother tightens her grip on her child's hand, and far away, another child's bed remains empty. Is evil merely a rumor? Or is there something in the shadows waiting for the right moment to strike? I am Jessica, and you are listening to Stories Philippines podcast. This is Season 4, Episode 3, The Traveler's Mark. Folklore is said to be born when fear and uncertainty meet around a fire. In the Philippines, the fire is wide, the shadows are long, and some stories burn longer than others. One of the most persistent modern legends is that of the Manunupat, or Wawe, the taker, the merciless, the stranger in the white van who turns ordinary nights into battlegrounds for the young, the poor, and the defenseless. Yet as with so many stories, what begins as an isolated incident, a fleeting rumor, quickly becomes a tale everyone seems to know by heart. Over time, it gathers weight, drawing together scraps of truth, fragments of old folklore, and the full force of society's collective dread. A 32-year-old named Emerson submitted a listener account from the early 2000s about his younger cousin, Mara. The family lived in a densely packed neighborhood in Tondo, where narrow streets threaded between low houses and sari-sari stores, and kids often walked home together. But not always. One afternoon after school, Mara walked alone along a familiar route, her school bag bumping against her side. The sky was already leaning toward late afternoon. Shadows pooled in doorways, and the air carried the sharp smell of frying food from nearby stalls. A white van appeared and began to move slowly beside her, keeping pace without overtaking. Its paint was dull, the windows darkened, one front passenger window was wound down an inch. Mara noticed the van but told herself it would pass. Then a voice, low and easy from that small opening, offered her a packet of sweets, new, gleaming under the late sun, wrapped in bright foreign paper she'd never seen before. Mara remembered how her scalp prickled at the offer, an animal instinct that made her shoulders tighten. She had heard the stories, whispered warnings about children who were coaxed away, rumors that spread from neighbor to neighbor, teacher to student. The details of those tales weren't always the same, but the fear was. She didn't stop to look closer. The memory Emerson later recounted was clipped and urgent. Mara bolted. Her feet pounded the cracked pavement, her breath coming fast, the sound of her own heartbeat loud in her ears. Her school bag bounced, a loose strap slapped against her hip. She ran with the practiced desperation that only a child familiar with danger could produce. She didn't dare glance back until she reached the next intersection. And when she did, the van was simply gone. No screech of tires, no accelerating engine, nothing to mark its departure. It seemed to have dissolved into the ordinary clutter of the street: vendors, tricycles, a stray dog. Emerson's retelling emphasized how ordinary the moment felt before it wasn't. The slice of everyday life interrupted by something uncanny. In his post, he reflected on how that single, loose detail, the sweets in strange wrappers, had the power to make a familiar place feel unsafe. He described the way his family tightened rules after that. Mara stopped walking alone when she could avoid it. Parents walked with younger children. Neighbors traded more than gossip at alleyway doors. They passed warnings and watchful looks. In the comments beneath the submission, others added their own echoes: accounts of vans idling outside schools, a strange car that circled a block more than once, or a person whispering offers at playground gates. Some stories were secondhand, told by elders who remembered similar scares from decades prior, while others were recent, carrying the same grain of fear. Together, these voices formed a patchwork of memory and caution, a community's attempt to make sense of moments that were sudden, frightful, and ultimately unexplained. But why does the legend of the Manunupat endure, weaving itself into the very texture of Filipino city life? Let us move back in time to the 1990s, a period simmering with uncertainty. The country's wounds under dictatorship remained raw. Crime was not only rampant, but often inexplicable. Statistics spiked and receded, but fear never softened its hold on the population. Abductions did occur, some for ransom, others without reason. Each event was recounted with embellishment, stoking new terrors. A headline might detail the disappearance of a schoolboy at dusk, and by nightfall, the story would multiply in alleys and kitchens. The boy had not only been lost, he'd been carved up for his organs, his heart and kidneys sent abroad. Soon, suspicion would settle on the pale bulk of any van seen cruising the outskirts. Folklorists and journalists alike have traced how this tale spread. The Aswang Project, a major compendium of Filipino supernatural beliefs, details the unique way urban legends like that of the Manunupat graft onto older fears. Where the Aswang and Manananggal once terrorized provincial villages, monsters who devoured children and pregnant women, the Manunupat became a new face for timeless anxieties. But this monster drove a van, not a carabao, and used wealth, guile, and science rather than sharpened claws. Thus, while the setting modernized, the primal terror was unchanged. The child stolen by forces beyond understanding, the family rendered powerless. Yet this legend is not only Philippine, it is global. A common story found wherever poverty and systemic weakness allow the powerful to prey on the defenseless. In Latin America, tales circulate about La Lavanderia, a mythical network of child abductors and organ traders. In urban Africa, rumors of the Black Mercedes fuel nightly warnings. And in the Philippines, the Manunupat is always just out of sight, dangerous because he is so ordinary. He makes victims of those whom society has already abandoned. In almost every version, the poor and the young are most at risk. The system, police, barangay officials, hospital staff, is painted as complicit or indifferent. Nobody helps the families of stolen children. One commenter left bluntly under a post, because nobody cares to look that hard for the disappeared. Across continents, the stories share common motifs. A figure who blends into crowds, a vehicle that appears unexpectedly at dusk, an indifferent bureaucracy that treats disappearances as routine paperwork rather than tragedies. Oral histories and whispered warnings pass from neighbor to neighbor, each retelling adding small but chilling details. How the abductors speak politely, how they show forged documents or claim to be officials performing welfare checks, how families are blamed for carelessness. In places where the state's presence is weak or corrupt, these narratives become both explanation and coping mechanism, a way for communities to name dangers that official channels ignore.
The social consequences are profound. Parents change habits, children are kept closer to home, playtime is curtailed, trust between neighbors frays. Merchants install stronger locks and turn away suspicious customers. At times, communal life hardens into suspicion, and everyday kindnesses, letting a child tag along to the sari-sari store, giving a stranger a lift, become acts fraught with moral risk. The psychological toll is heavy. Mothers and fathers live with a heightened, persistent fear. Youth grow up learning to be cautious rather than curious. These legends also reflect deeper structural failures. When institutions meant to protect, healthcare, law enforcement, social services, are underfunded, mismanaged, or capture the interests of the powerful, rumor fills the vacuum. Stories that center on institutional indifference underscore painful truths. For many marginalized families, remedies are slow or non-existent, and justice, when it comes, is rare. The persistence of such myths is itself a signal. Communities are trying to interpret patterns of exploitation and neglect they cannot otherwise redress. Yet, the narratives do not only mourn loss, they also inspire action. In some neighborhoods, collective watch groups form, community leaders coordinate safer routes for children, and local health workers collaborate with parents to improve record-keeping and awareness. Activists use the stories to advocate for better resourcing of protective services, arguing that acknowledging fear is the first step toward addressing the underlying vulnerabilities. Journalists and researchers who take these tales seriously can uncover real networks of abuse or, at minimum, surface systemic negligence that demands accountability. Ultimately, these legends are mirrors. They reflect the anxieties of communities who have seen the state fail them and the creative ways people try to protect one another in the absence of reliable institutions. Whether rooted in particular criminal enterprises or amplified by rumor, the tales of La Lavanderia, the Black Mercedes, and the Manunu Pot speak to a universal anxiety. The terrifying possibility that the most dangerous predators are ordinary-looking, and that society's margins remain perilously exposed. Let us follow the trail of this fear into the alleys of Manila and the dusty roads of the provinces. A 13-year-old named Kiefer, a podcast listener, described a time in 1999 when he thought he witnessed a snatching. He'd been playing outside in the late afternoon when a white van with dark windows stopped at the edge of the vacant lot where the neighborhood kids gathered. Two men he'd never seen before stepped out, their faces shadowed and mostly hidden beneath ball caps pulled low. They leaned toward one another and whispered. Then one of them called over a group of younger boys with a casual, distracted wave that seemed rehearsed. Kiefer said his friend Paolo froze in place. The men's voices were kind, but there was something behind them I don't know how to describe. An unnameable menace that made the air feel different. The boys, sensing something wrong, ran in a scatter toward home and safety. Kiefer remembered the van peeling away as quickly and quietly as it had appeared, leaving the empty lot and the stunned children behind. Social researchers note that these kinds of stories spread most widely during times of social disorder and uncertainty. In 2001, for example, several news outlets and public reports claimed a sharp rise in missing children, and national television and radio treated the idea of kidnappers in vans as a grave and immediate danger to community safety. Yet clear, corroborating evidence proved difficult to find. Many alleged sightings could not be independently confirmed, and genuine cases were often mixed with rumor, secondhand accounts, and hearsay that complicated efforts to separate fact from fear. Still, the lack of proof did not calm public anxiety. It intensified it. When incidents cannot be definitively disproven, people may assume they are widespread. For many, that lingering uncertainty felt like its own form of proof and was enough to keep the panic alive. Modern science tells us folklore is adaptive. It helps people process what seems too vast or too terrifying for a single explanation. For every abduction rumor that fizzled, a new one took its place. The monster is never vanquished. It merely changes form. On the paranormal side, believers offered their own spin. Some said the Manunupot could enchant his targets, that he employed gayuma, a kind of magical lure, so children and adults alike abandoned their senses, willing to follow the stranger to certain doom. Old women in the provinces taught their grandchildren rituals of avoidance: iron in the pockets, salt scattered at the threshold, special prayers spoken before sunrise and after sunset. Locations tied to the legend are, in themselves, characters in the story. The teeming streets of Tondo, the winding alleys of Quiapo, the bustling jeepney terminals of Cubao, all are places where thousands pass, and nobody looks too closely at the face beside them. In the provinces, banana groves and school playgrounds take on a sinister purpose after dusk. The urban legend overlays itself on the map, so every van is suspect. Every unfamiliar adult is the Manunupot in disguise. Media coverage, if anything, fueled the fire. In the early 2000s, mainstream networks ran exclusive stories on supposed organ harvesting rings. Investigative programs featured families grieving for missing children, community leaders warning the public, and police chasing phantom suspects. Television shaped and sharpened the narrative. It gave the Manunupot a modern wardrobe and a starring role in the national imagination. Parallel international cases deepened the fear. In neighboring countries like Malaysia and Indonesia, similar tales rose: white vans, playgrounds, missing organs. Globally, stories about the kidney heist surfaced, some grounded in single, gruesome crimes, others so elaborate they verged on fantasy. When the world seemed too big and its dangers too complex, people used legend as a lens to make sense of the threat. But why this legend at this time? Many observers argue it reflects a widespread feeling of being preyed on by something much larger, a system that feeds on the weak and uncaringly grinds them down. When the powerless see the rich shielded by gates and security escorts, and their own protection amounting only to skepticism and luck, who can blame them for imagining organized, empowered evil lurking in the streets? The Manunupot is a personification of this invisible threat. A listener submitted memory from 2004 remembers Chell, now a nurse, and the disappearance of her childhood playmate, Roy. They grew up on the same narrow street of a barangay where houses leaned close like old friends. As children, they raced barefoot between alleys, shared mangoes torn into strips, and traded secrets beneath the dangling light of a sari-sari store. Roy was the quieter of the two, small-boned, quick with a shy grin, and determined to help his family however he could. When his mother ran out of change for lunch or when the household needed a little more, he would gather yesterday's newspapers and walk toward the market, hoping to trade the pages for a few coins. The last time anyone in the neighborhood saw him, he stood near an old white van that idled by the corner. He was arranging a bundled stack of newspapers, fingers smudged with dust and ink. Someone remembered him waving at a vendor. Another person said he had spoken to a man in the van. After that, the memory thins. Days later, his family began to knock on doors, eyes rimmed with sleep and panic, calling his name into the humid evenings until their throats were raw. Rumors spread as fast as the insect chorus at dusk. The more the neighbors tried to help, the more versions grew. That he had been taken for his organs, that he'd been grabbed by men who prowled in white vans, that he had been lured away with candy and promises of work, that the city's anonymous hunger had simply swallowed him, lost among crowds and long roads. Some swore they had glimpsed him in a market across town. Others swore they had seen the van leave late that afternoon, license plates blurred by memory. The family put up flyers, talked to barangay officials, and rode jeepneys to the police station with hope that thinned each day. Volunteers searched dump sites, riverbanks, and abandoned lots. Old neighbors who had once traded guavas now sat shoulder to shoulder and whispered the same names into the same despair. A priest came to bless the street. A woman brought rice and prayers. For months, the house by the corner, the one with the wind bell that chimed when someone opened the gate, kept a place at the table for a boy who no longer came home. His small shoes stayed by the door, a mute accusation and an aching wish. Chell, who had been almost inseparable from Roy, found herself learning how to live beside an absence. She replayed that day 1,000 ways. What if they had insisted he stay for lunch? What if they had taken the van's plate? What if she had let him carry less weight? Memory became a restless thing. Habits turned into questions, and questions into stories that tried to hold the missing pieces together. Friends offered their theories, some helpful, some cruel. Over time, those theories softened into narratives the community used to fill the silence. Sometimes the stories were small and tender, that Roy had been taken in by a cousin who had escaped the city and would return for the family when life steadied. Sometimes they were monstrous, that he had been taken for his organs, sold to strangers with wallets and no names. And sometimes the story was practical and bleak, that in a place where hunger pushed children onto streets, the city simply consumed what it could not account for. In Chell's telling, the worst wound was not the violence of any single rumor, but the way not knowing became a resident truth. She learned to fold grief into daily life, to nurse patients by day and stand at the doorway at night watching for someone who would never come. Sometimes it is worse not knowing, she said. You learn to fill the silence with stories. Those stories kept Roy alive in different ways. As a ghost you could blame, as a lost child to be mourned, as a cautionary tale to protect other children. Each version relieved the ache a little, even while it exposed new fears. Years later, the corner where they had played still smelled of fried fish and diesel. The Sari Sari store was painted a different color, and a few houses had been rebuilt. But when Chell walked past that gate, she still felt the hollow where a boy should have been. In the clinic where she works, she listens to other people's losses. Mothers searching for missing daughters, families with names that repeat like a chorus. Her hands are steady now. She knows how to clean wounds and how to stitch skin. She also knows how to hold silence without filling it every time, though sometimes the silence presses so hard that she reaches for a story again. The community never agreed on what happened to Roy. No official closure arrived, no trial, no confession. The unanswered question shaped the neighborhood, a memory that both warned and bound people together. In telling his story, Chell kept choosing the gentlest details. The way he tucked a shirt into his shorts, how he saved 2 coins for a sweet, the way he laughed when splashing in the rain. Those small recollections became their way of refusing to let a child be erased by rumor. There are neighborhoods where the missing are cataloged and then carried away by statistics. There are others where absence accumulates into folklore. In Chell's barangay, the two mixed in uneasy balance. The wound of uncertainty never closed completely, but it taught people something about communal care. The ways a shared question can produce both tenderness and fear, vigilance and myth. For Chell, who now tends other people's bodies and listens to grief as part of her work, the lesson is lived every day, that stories can be both a balm and a burden, and that sometimes the refusal to leave a silence alone is the only way to honor what has been lost. Folklore experts on the Aswang Project argue that urban legends fill the blank space between official truth and everyday fear. Where answers are lacking, story steps in. Urban legend becomes social glue, uniting frightened parents, vigilant neighbors, alert shopkeepers. Yet it also becomes a wedge, stoking suspicion and casting doubt on anyone, any van, anytime. Modern investigations have never conclusively proved the existence of large-scale organ harvesting rings as depicted in the most dramatic stories. Yes, there have been cases of illegal sales, often involving desperate adults and complicit doctors, but nearly all white van kidnappings have been traced back to exaggeration, miscommunication, or panic-driven rumor. Still, there is always one story that escapes debunking, one disappearance that cannot be explained, and it is these that keep the legend alive. Surprisingly, not all stories end in terror. A listener-submitted account from a mother in Pampanga described how heightened fear in her village led to the formation of volunteer patrols. Teenagers banded together to escort children home from school. Communities developed secret signals so adults could distinguish friendly faces from lurking strangers. The legend, while rooted in panic, spurred real protective action and unity. Behavioral researchers highlight how such tales also serve as cautionary warnings for children. Stranger danger becomes a living rule, embodied in the specter of the Manunu Pot. While the legend's details evolve, the function remains the same: to keep the vulnerable wary, to embody a threat so that precautions are remembered, and perhaps heeded. Yet this caution can have its own costs. Social trust erodes, communities become insular, neighbors regard one another with suspicion, and every van is a potential wolf. Experts have warned that while it's healthy to be vigilant, ceaseless fear breeds division and suffering. When your world is filled with hidden monsters, it is easy to forget they are, for the most part, imaginary. Reflecting on this, Chell wrote in her post, "We become what we fear sometimes. The monster is not always in the van. It can be in the rumors we share and the trust we break." Parallel stories abroad reinforce this. In Korea, legends arise about taxi drivers harvesting organs from travelers. In Russia, dark tales swirl about forest kidnappers. Humanity's collective memory is filled with monsters, sometimes to warn us, sometimes to distract us from the ordinary dangers of daily life. For modern Filipino listeners, the legend of the Manunu Pot Wawe carries unsettling questions. How much of the world's cruelty is organized and tangible? How much is simply the result of cold indifference? When society fails its weakest, do they fall victim to monstrous strangers or to the apathy of their neighbors? Today, the legend persists not because it is factually true, but because it is emotionally useful. It functions as a tool, a mirror for a society wrestling with fear, sorrow, and hope. In Vanished Children, we see the fragility of all our plans. In the white van, we see the implacable machinery of systems that do not value every life. In the rumors that circulate online, we see the desperate attempt to keep danger at bay by naming it. Legends ask less for proof than for attention. They gather the fragments we cannot otherwise hold. A missing bike, a late-night light in a neighbor's window, the rumor of a face in a rearview mirror. Once told, stories alter how we look at ordinary streets and ordinary people. They teach caution, they share grief, and sometimes they console. They also distort. The story wants a villain, a pattern, a vessel to hold collective pain, and it will supply them whether the evidence fits or not.
That is why the legend endures. It is less about the precise facts than about the needs it answers. To be seen, to be warned, to remember. And so every version, every retelling keeps alive the simultaneous truths of loss and yearning. That we are small in a world with dangers we cannot always name, and that naming them is one of the few acts that makes us feel less helpless. As the white van rolls quietly down the road, headlights flickering over huddled homes, the city remembers every lost child, every rumor, every warning whispered on a humid evening. The legend never ends. It only moves from one neighborhood to another, as real and as elusive as fear itself. If you have your own stories, experiences, or family legends that echo these warnings about the Manunu Pot or the Wawawe, we invite you to share them. Submit your stories to our email, storiesphpodcast@gmail.com. Find show notes and support options in the description below this episode. Access exclusive content on Patreon, and follow us on social media for daily folklore facts and conversations about the stories that haunt our nights. As this episode draws to a close, I ask you, when fear becomes a legend, does it protect us from the darkness, or does it keep us from seeing the light in others? Are the monsters always out there, or are they, in some way, also within us? As one commentator once wrote, "It is easier to be afraid than to understand. But understanding is what sets us free." Keep listening for more hidden chapters of our nation's folklore. There are shadows yet unmapped and monsters unnamed. waiting for the right story to bring them to light. Do not forget to like, subscribe, follow, and share this podcast. Support the podcast financially in ways you can find in the show notes. Thank you for joining me on this journey into the dark and back again. Salamat, and goodbye.